Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for another intentional hiking event. And I am very pleased to have the one and only Glen Van Peski here tonight to talk about the philosophy of ultralight and his new book, Take Less, Do More. Glen is the founder and of the popular ultralight backpacking company Gossamer Gear. And he's also a friend and fellow hiker in Bend, Oregon, where I've been lucky enough to get to know him better. I am your host, Renee Shira Patrick, and I am an addicted long distance hiker who discovered the amazing and empowering feeling of spending extended time in nature 22 years ago with my first through hike on the Appalachian Trail. I created this event series to help myself and others in the hiking community like you develop a culture of thoughtfulness and intention about the time we spend outside on trails. So thank you for being here. So a couple housekeeping items. Please use the chat throughout the event. You can share any comments you have, any reactions as the evening progresses. Next, please keep your video on or plan to turn your video on during the conversation portion of tonight. So this series is as much about building community as it is learning more about the specific topic. And I think seeing each other will help in fostering those connections. I also want to thank Jess, who is providing back-end support during the event today. Thank you, Jess. So first, I'm going to start with our event flow for today. So I'm going to give you an introduction and then we'll hear from Glen. After that, we'll have some giveaways from Gossamer Gear, and Glen will be giving away some copies of his book. Then we'll get into the conversation portion of tonight for about 15 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. So the whole event will take an hour to an hour and a half. For those of you joining for the first time, each intentional hiking event will be focused on one of the following themes: do, learn, create, be, and regional focus. Tonight, this one is a be event, focus on tips for those wanting to move lightly through life and on the trail. So I'm bringing you all together through these events because I believe that we are a powerful force for change. Beyond developing an intentional hiking practice in our own personal trail experiences, I think the impacts and effects of our actions can help influence the world around us. So now I want to see a raise of hands, either real hands or emoji. How many of you out there consider yourselves ultralight hikers? Just curious to get a view of everyone out there today. And if you're not ultralight, how many of you aspire to be ultralight? And go ahead and type it into the chat. What aspect of ultralight appeals to you most? So maybe it's trying to be kinder to your knees or your feet. Maybe you want to hike faster miles or longer miles. Yeah, I see a little bit of everything. Be kind to my joints. Simplicity, yes, that's great. I think we come to ultralight maybe with different reasons, but hopefully we can all find some new things, some new inspiration here tonight. So honestly, I like to joke that I've never been ultralight, and I don't usually weigh my pack, which is like unheard of in the long distance hiking community. That's not quite the whole truth. I don't usually weigh my full complete pack, but I do tend to carry a light shelter, a quilt, or a very light sleeping bag. And I pay attention to the big items that weigh a lot, mainly so I can carry books and beer. Okay, maybe it's not always books and beer, because many of my recent hikes have been longer distances in deserts. So I actually just got back from a week on the Idaho Centennial Trail in the desert section, where I only placed one water cache when most hikers place 5 to 6. So I was happy to carry more water in lieu of spending extra day placing caches, but I also had a 7-day food carry. So I was suffering, and I was wondering, why am I not ultralight? This is ridiculous. I often will be guilty of discounting the food and water weight until it's too late and I'm out there. But intentionally reducing your pack weight can greatly improve your body's ability to hike long distances. And I'll wager some of the things that Glen will share with us here tonight will also greatly improve our ability to live a long and fulfilling life. I had the opportunity to read Glen's book in preparation for this presentation, and I have to say, I noted and highlighted just about everything he had in there. It was that poignant and impactful. So I really appreciate his approach to life on trail and off. So with that, Glen, welcome. Thank you for coming on today, and I will turn over the presentation to you.
Thanks, Shira. It's great to be here. I actually met Shira. She doesn't remember it, but she definitely made an impression in my mind. It was, when did we figure it was on the PCT? I forget, 20 years ago, something like that. I think she had just shaved her head recently and she was carrying a large plastic sword on the back of her pack. And I think I was out there with a bunch of Boy Scouts or hiking the PCT with Reed or something. But yeah, she made an impression I had never forgotten. I can't believe now I get to live in the same town with her. So I was going to start today with a very brief kind of summary of how I got to writing a book, just some history up to that, and then just briefly look at kind of three main topics of the book that transferring from ultralight hiking to life in general. So I am going to share my screen and see how this works here. I can find it. Let's see. Oops, share. And we'll go into that mode. Okay, so I assume if someone can tell me they're seeing that, that would be great.
We can see it.
Okay.
We're seeing it.
Because I lost the Zoom when I went to here. So
it's not full.
So I grew up in the Western United States, kind of Southern California. This is me camping with my dad in his International Harvester, not backpacking, but going to state campgrounds and stuff. And while I was lucky enough to grow up without the internet, so we spent most of our time outside, I was always curious about how things worked. And this is a little boy that entertained me when I had to be inside. That my dad made. And also, I had some weird fascination with washing dishes, which was a weird foreshadowing of my later career choices. This is me and my mom. And then my parents were divorced when I was in fourth grade, and we moved back to Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts. So, big change in weather from Southern California. Here I am getting ready to shovel snow into forts, probably. And I was in school, was in high school. This is evidence that I did indeed once have hair. And when I graduated high school, I had my first big adventure. I decided it would be a good idea to bicycle 4,200 miles across the United States. And three of my buddies said they wanted to come with me. And so that's what we did. That was then once on this side of the country. I got a college education, got married. This is Francie on that day, and had some kids. Was almost killed in a plane crash, and then eventually one of those kids got old enough to be in Boy Scouts. This is Brian on probably must have been our first Boy Scout trip. I went down to the local REI and said we're going to be in the Sierras for a week. What do we need? And bought everything. My pack weighed 70 pounds setting out for a week in the Sierras. And about that time, Ray Jardine's book, his first book, the Pacific Crest Trail Hiker's Handbook, came out. And my buddy Reed Miller read it and told me, hey, Glenn, you got to read this. And Reed decided he was going to section hike the PCT that year. I think it ended up taking 2 years maybe. So I ended up doing a lot of hiking with Reed in between Boy Scout hikes. So this is Reed and I somewhere above Treeline, my favorite place. Well, I left home knowing how to sew because my mom was convinced that every kid should know how to cook, bake, and sew. And I do all three of those to this day. So when I looked at my 7.5 pound pack that I had bought at REI, I figured that was a good place to start lightening things up. This is me with, I think, the G3. I made one pack, and as I hiked along, thought of ways it could be better, made another pack. And by the time I got to the fourth pack, it was pretty much where I liked it. This is the G4. And I put the plans on the internet so that anyone who wanted to could make one. I kept getting requests for them. So Brian ended up putting together a website and I started getting orders. I didn't know what to do. I grabbed a yellow line pad of paper and started writing down orders. And these are the first orders from the fledgling GVP gear. And we were off. And as we started selling packs and shelters and poles, I started speaking about ultralight to more and more people. We started attending hiker events. And Gossamer Gear continued to grow over the years. This is actually our second to last location, and continued to grow. Lots of twists and turns along the way. But one of those twists and turns was meeting and getting in business with John Mackey, co-founder of Whole Foods Market. And so I do a lot of hiking with John. And about 10 years ago, he started telling me on these hikes, Glenn, you should write a book. I'll write the foreword. And I told him I thought there were already lots of good books about ultralight backpacking, so didn't think I needed to add my 2 cents to the mix. But he kept up every year after year as we'd hike, and then pretty soon his friends started bugging me too. And eventually, a couple things transpired that I saw a way forward to finally write a book. And so that's how I ended up writing a book. And I didn't want to do it just on ultralight backpacking. There is one chapter, one lesson on kind of my thoughts on gear and backpacking in general. But the bulk of it is kind of applying those lessons to the rest of life, what I learned along the way. So three of those things kind of are in the general category of generosity, gratitude, and curiosity. And so I thought I'd just give a flyby of kind of those three. Some of this touches on the book, some of it probably isn't in there. I learned generosity at an early age. I think in the ultralight hiking community, there's a general theme of generosity, kind of among the early cottage manufacturers. And it started, I put the plans on the internet for free. I've never taken a salary from Gossamer Gear, didn't do it to make money, just made it to help get people into the outdoors. And it started with my mom. This is my mom on our wedding day. I mean, my wedding day, not hers. And she would mention noblesse oblige. And she didn't really teach us except by observing what she did. And that was the thought is if you have a lot, you need to share. And whether that's money or time or energy or skills or hospitality, you share. And then back on that bike trip in 1976, I had an experience that drove this home to me. We would at night, generally, if we were in a kind of rural small town, we'd go up and knock on a door and ask someone if we could stay on their front lawn. And one evening when we did this in Chatsworth, Illinois, an old guy answered the door and I explained we were looking for a place to spend the night. We're riding our bikes cross country. And he said, yeah, sure, you'll be more comfortable, over on the side yard. So we're setting up camp and he comes out to ask about our trip and ask what time we got going in the morning. I said, well, usually we leave pretty early. We got a lot of miles to do. And he looked disappointed. I said, well, why do you ask? And he said, well, we'd like to make you a proper breakfast to send you off, but my wife has really debilitating arthritis and the mornings are particularly hard for her. So I said, well, that's okay, sir. We just appreciate having a place to spend the night. We don't expect anything else. The next morning, as we're packing up, the door opens and he beckons us to come into the house. And so we walked across the dew-soaked lawn and into their kitchen, their small kitchen, which was full of food. His wife had gotten up, battled through the pain, and made eggs and bacon and sausage and potatoes and pancakes and biscuits and gravy. I'm pretty sure we ate in one sitting their weekly breakfast allotment. I'm sure. And I was just impressed that it was so important to them that the wife had pushed through the pain because they wanted to send us off with a big breakfast. And I've been telling that story for almost 50 years. And I like to think that as long as they were around, they told that story too from their side of it. Gosh, remember that summer in 1976? Those four hungry boys ate our week's worth of groceries in one sitting. Um, Creating margin. One thing that going lighter in the backcountry does, it creates margin so you can help other people. If everyone's carrying 70-pound packs and you have an issue, it's pretty hard to redistribute gear. One year in Buckskin Gulch, Francie, my wife, was having issues with her arthritis acting up. And so it was easy enough for me to, because I was traveling light and because she's married to me, she was traveling light. I hoisted her pack on my back and my pack on my front, and I could still travel, and it was probably still carrying less weight than a lot of the people we met. And creating margin in your life is not just about um, money, but that's certainly one way, but can be just not overscheduling your life. So you have time to notice other people that are in need of help. I recently read a book, Infectious Generosity, just published by Chris Anderson, the TED Talks guy, and it's a fascinating book. He talks about generosity. And there are a bunch of studies that show most people think that if they had 20% more money, more income, then they'd be happy. But studies also show that once they get that 20% increase, it only lasts for a very short time. And then they think, gosh, if I just had 20% more, then I'd be happy. But they did some studies related to this book that showed that people who are generous and actually give away money, that equates to a happiness that's roughly a doubling of income. And the best part is it doesn't go away with time. That happiness at that generosity, at being generous, continues on. One of the ways to implement this is something we've done, and you can call it whatever you want, tithing account or gratitude account, but we have a separate checking account that we put a set portion of all income into that account. And this is a way that you can intentionally create margin in your life to meet needs as they present themselves. You just need to decide if they have your name on them. And if they do, you have the money to address those. And we started small and it's increased over time. But this is an easy way. And the studies they cite on infectious generosity are interesting because most of the time they give people money that they can either keep or give away, but it's essentially found money. And a gratitude account creates this effect in your own life with your own money, but essentially it's out of your budget. So it's something you can be generous with. Secondly, I want to talk a little about gratitude and how ultralight backpacking creates this and how that can come into the rest of your life. This is a trip I took, a 3-day trip in the Sierras with just a lumbar pack. And going into the wilderness with very little stuff is a great reminder of really how little I need to be happy. It's great at resetting expectations. There's nothing like sleeping on the ground, maybe in the snow, being wet and cold for a week, to give you a new appreciation for the miracles of hot running water, thermostats to set any temperature you want, and all the things that we take for granted in our daily life. It also reminds me that happiness is a 2x2 matrix between what we want and don't want and what we have and don't have. Things, of course, that we want and we have make us happy. Things that we don't want or don't have, but we do want is generally what things we see on other people's Instagram accounts, and that is a source of unhappiness. And also there's things that we have that we don't want, things in our life that we rather were not part of our life. And that doesn't make us happy. But a huge source of happiness that is often overlooked is thinking about things that we don't have, but we also don't want. And this can apply to possessions, can apply to health, situations you find yourself in. And while media gives us plenty of things that we maybe don't have, but we want, it can also be a rich source of things that other people have in their life that they don't want, but we don't have in our life. One of the ways I combat this in my life is I have a when I'm rich list on my iPhone. And when I think there's something that I want, but I don't have, instead of just buying it, I put it on my list. And this is a way for it to just percolate for a while. And I realized that a lot of things, when I leave them on there long enough, it takes off the urge to buy them. And I realize, yeah, I really don't need them and I don't want them that much. And if I did get them, it wouldn't keep me happy for that long. So keeping them on the list is a way to make sure they don't just end up in my closet. And finally, on curiosity, as an engineer, I'm always kind of wondering and tinkering. And there's something about being in the wilderness that allows your mind the time to just wonder and wander. In our packed daily lives, we have so little of that time. We're so structured, so overstimulated that when you're spending time in the wilderness, you have time to wonder, like, gosh, what would happen if I used my shelter as my rain gear? Or, gee, I wonder, can you really use tent stakes as chopsticks? Part of something you gain in the wilderness that you can bring to the front country also is just noticing things. When you're on a long hike, the reduction in stimuli means you notice different things. You notice bird songs and things like that. And for me in the front country, if I'm practicing noticing things, I notice things like this sign on the local bakery that they're hiring high school students for part-time dishwashers and things like that. Being aware of things like that can lead to exciting career changes, like me washing dishes at my local bakery. So that's just some brief, very brief thoughts, because I want to leave plenty of time for questions. So we talk about things that everyone else is curious about. So that's kind of a flyby summary of.
Great. Thank you so much,
Thoughts in the
Glenn.
book.
Yeah. I had one section, like I said, I read most of the book, or I read it all and highlighted a lot. But one that really resonated me with you was your section on balance is the key. So in it, you say, the second reason I like to minimize my weight is to minimize the things that stand between me and nature. And I love that so much because my connection to nature is one of the primary driving forces in my life right now, and a big part of intentional hiking. So for me, that looks like sleeping outside my shelter if it's not raining, so I can wake up and look at the stars. But off trail, it's positioning my desk so I can look out the window and see what's happening with the weather, look at the local squirrels and see all the antics they're getting up to. So yeah, I just want to say, I think hopefully a lot of you will find some really valuable stuff in there. So we want to open it up to you. So please come off mute if you have a question for Glenn or a comment. Bill, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yes. Oh, first off, this is great. Thanks, Glenn, for sharing all this with us. A lot of the things that you said resonate a lot with me, and I think I haven't read the book yet, but I do plan to, and I actually think it might be one of those things that I read periodically to remind myself, because the section that you talked about, the whole don't want, don't have, right? Section like that, finding gratitude or finding like value and happiness in that section of your life. I just think that's so lost on me most of the time. And that's having through hiked, all three of the major trails. When I'm on trail, that part of my happiness gets bigger. I start realizing the things I don't have and that I don't want them, and that grows. But when I come back to like, society, I start wanting things again, even though I don't want to want things. So I guess, my question to you is, how do you handle, like, do you have that problem too? And like, if so, how do you handle like pushing away the things that you don't want to want? I know you said a little bit about like having that list and keeping things on the list. That's one thing I will definitely, one technique I'll definitely adopt. But any other advice you can give on that would be great.
Yeah, it's hard because, living in the United States, we're bombarded with so much that looks cool and is designed to look cool. And gosh, wouldn't that be neat? And of course, luckily, in terms of gear, when you're an ultralight backpacker, my first thing, it looks cool, but if it's not lighter than something I have, it's like, nah, I'm not interested. So that saves me from a lot of gear purchases. Um, and it's hard that I have a friend who actually is a ultralight hiker, and he has an even more robust system. He calls his shopping diet. And before he buys something, and obviously, like groceries and stuff like that, I mean, he's got some guidelines and rules, but before he buys anything, like even we had, when we came out with a new tent, he said, gosh, that looks good, looks perfect. He says, I want to buy one. I hope it's still in stock when my shopping window opens. So he's pretty hardcore, and he only has a shopping window open for like a week or two twice a year. So when he wants to buy something, he puts it on a list. And then when his shopping window opens, he looks at that list and decides and does one of three things. Either I'm going to buy it, I still want it, I think it's going to be a good thing. Or he takes it off the list, like, nah, not really interested in that anymore. Or he leaves it on the list, like, it still might be nice, but I'm not inclined to buy it now. And he says about 70 to 80% of the items end up in those last two categories, that he only buys like a fraction of what's on the list. And he says it saved him from a lot of stuff. Um, so I don't know if that helps, but
That definitely helps. A shopping window. I'm writing these things down. This is
well,
great.
and I thought I had ideas. I haven't implemented the shopping window yet, but my plan was actually to have the shopping window. If I was going to have two shopping windows, I'd have one in like June and one in November. And so the June one is before my birthday in July. So if there was stuff that I decided I wanted, I could have other people buy it for me, which the point isn't like I could afford it, obviously, not to have them spend it, but it avoids them buying me something that I don't want, that's not on my list. And so, with strategic placement, then the other one, like in November for Christmas, you could have maybe encourage people to buy you things that are actually kind of on your list that you decided you want rather than stuff that they think you might want, but you don't.
I love that. And I'll say one piece of advice. I live in a very small apartment. So when I buy something else has to go. That helps too.
That's perfect.
Any other questions out there? Please feel free to raise your hand or come off mute.
Hey, Glenn, this is Roger Carpenter. Hi.
Hey, Roger. Good to
Hey,
see you again.
yeah, good to see you. Your uh, your mention of curiosity. Where did that start with you? How young were you when you realized you had this sense of curiosity? Because a man who hired me back when I was 22 years old, and I had just completed a cycling trip, like my junior year of high school, similar to what you did in 76. Mine was in 71. But he seemed to see a sense of curiosity, and he thought that was a valuable qualification or skill for the job that I was interviewing for, and I got the job on the spot. So I'm just wondering, has that sense of curiosity ever helped you in your career, and where did you get that sense of curiosity from?
I think I was born with it. My dad's an engineer, so I think I was just born an engineer. So I'm just always curious about things. And I guess I agree with the guy that hired you because, I've had engineering companies and, you can tell one guy to like draft something and he'll draft for the next 20 years, never asking a question like, I wonder if there's a better way to do this, or I wonder why they wrote this number this way and maybe I should ask and maybe it means something or maybe there's a mistake or, you know, some people are curious and some people aren't. And I guess you need probably non-curious people. I don't know, maybe to like take out the trash or I would say wash dishes, but even washing dishes, we had an issue with the pastry bags because you can't put them in the automatic dishwasher. They flop around. You can't. And so I got a piece of brass rod and bent it in a way that the top of it went inside the pastry bag and the bottom part of it was kind of a square and would click onto the tray so you could wash the insides and the outsides of the pastry bag. So I guess I think curiosity is always an asset.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, Glenn, is about the best thing about, for me, being ultralight in my hiking is the simplicity, not just in my day-to-day approach to hiking, but the gear that I'm using. That not only should I like a shelter that's light, but it's easy to put up. For example, it's got fewer things I have to tighten or fewer sticks to put in. Does that sense of simplicity go into your gear designs?
It does somewhat, yes. And that's a tricky part. And there are, I call it the fuss factor. I mean, there's ways that I could save weight now, but there's a certain fuss factor that I'm just not interested in. At some point, yeah, I could save a couple grams, but it's going to take me another half hour to do that. And it's just a pain. So definitely I take into account the fuss factor. How difficult is it to set up? Now, at some point going lightweight, there's a trade-off for skills versus weight. So, it takes more skill to set up a tarp maybe than a standard tent with poles. But yeah, I definitely agree. The simplicity is a nice feature.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thanks, Roger. Anyone else out there want to chime in?
Bob Ballou here. Hi, Glenn.
Hi, Bob.
Good to see you. Thanks to Renee for bringing this all together. It's been a long time.
It has been a very long time.
23 years since I retired from the PCTA, and a good many years since I did any backpacking. My wife and I were up in the Mammoth Lakes area on an outing, and both of us were not feeling very well when we started, and it got worse, and turned around, came back to the trailhead at Mary Lake, and as light as we were at the time, we're not nearly as light as you all are now, but we looked at each other, and it was pouring down rain, got in the car, looked at each other, and simultaneously said, "This isn't fun anymore." And I don't remember, gosh, I'm 84 now, so it was, I don't know when it was, but anyway, in 2011, we bought a little trailer that we could get into the trailheads with and do day hikes. But I want to thank you for your innovation in the area of ultralight equipment, because you and a few others out there really made a huge difference in people's ability to enjoy the out of doors and not look at that trek as a burden and an arduous task. It made it for my wife to enjoy backpacking and for me to enjoy her being with me also. And from the curiosity standpoint, Renee can vouch for this, since we met last summer in eastern Utah. I moved to Cedar City, Utah in about 5 years ago. And after a couple of years here, I had a dream. I think it was a dream anyway, in the middle of the night a couple of years ago. Why isn't there a national scenic trail between Arches and Zion? And so I got to digging on maps and looking around and asking questions, and Renee joined me and my wife to explore a little bit what we could. And her time frame was limited to one day, and we got to know each other a little bit. But I have since pursued some elements to what might lead to that, and I recently had an opportunity to meet with Governor Cox, Utah Governor Cox. Shared the concept with him briefly because it was at a meet and greet with lots of other people. He lit up like a flare and wanted to know more. So I've sent his staff information, and they're looking at the idea of putting it on a long range plan with state planners to work with National Forest Service and Park Service and BLM people, because it traverses a lot of those lands. But I had to take a break from it due to some health issues in our house. And but I'm getting back to it now. I'm looking for others that might be interested in partnering or getting involved in putting together some I don't know, getting an organization, loosely structured organization to check it out, see if it's worth something we'd like to try and do together. But I am not going to go ground-proof it myself. I'm just not physically able to do that. But anyway, it's an idea, and if people want more, they can contact me directly if you want. May I throw out my email address, Renee? Is that?
Sure. Yeah. If you want to type it in the chat, then folks can see it and
Okay.
Respond if they want to follow up with you. Great idea.
Yeah, it's really pretty simple because it relates to long distance trails. It's P as in Peter, NTS, Partnership International Trail System, bob@gmail.com. PNTS bob@gmail.com, and I will type it in here somewhere.
I got it for you, Bob.
Oh, you got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm just not so very fast right now. I'm dealing with sciatica today and not feeling real hot. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Bob. So Glenn, you and Bob met before?
Yeah, I was on the board of the PCTA many years ago.
Yeah, Glenn joined the board after I had departed my PCTA job, but we've met at annual meetings, I think. When I was closer, when I was in Sacramento and in Minden, Nevada, I would go over to the annual meetings. It's a little far to go from Cedar City, Utah.
That's a little bit of a drive.
Great. Well, we probably have time for one more question before we move on to giveaways. We've got a lot of sweet things to give away tonight. Anyone else have a question for Glenn or a comment?
Glenn, what is the best way to purchase your book? Amazon?
Well, depends on you. Yeah, it's available for pre-order on Amazon or any of the online sellers. You can also order at your local bookstore. They can order it for you. It's available at Gossamer Gear. And I think the first 100 copies from Gossamer Gear will be signed. Backpacking Light has some, so just about anywhere. Or you could just send me an email and I could send you one.
Or you might win one tonight.
There you
go. So thank you so much for that, Glenn, and for all your comments and questions, everyone. So as Glenn mentioned, you can find out more on his website. I think the official launch is the 16th of April. I also suggest you look at his website because he's got tips and advice, and he writes a blog where he continues to create connections between life on trail and off trail in this ultralight sort of philosophy. And thanks to your generosity, everyone who registered, you raised $100 for the Pacific Crest Trail Association. And I believe all the proceeds from your book, Glenn, are going to the PCTA as well. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I'm taking no money from sales of the book.
Yeah, so I think let's keep this generosity flowing, because I love that fact that it brings more contentment and happiness than money. I think that's beautiful, and let's carry it forward. So with that, let's give away some stuff. Continue this generosity. So I'm gonna take over the screen now. So Glenn is going to give away 3 copies of his book, and then we're going to give away a Mariposa 60 backpack from Gossamer Gear and the One Shelter. So first, I want to tell you a little bit more. Glenn shared a lot about Gossamer Gear, but the company has been shedding every possible gram while elevating performance, comfort, and durability. So you can't hike very far on a long distance trail without seeing a Gossamer Gear packer shelter. And all of that started with Glenn's engineering mind, looking for better ways to do things. I wanted to share a few words from the Gossamer Gear team about how they approach their work with intention. So they shared that we are a small team of 6 full-time employees and a few amazing contractors. We all work closely together to best support the community we've built and those who have welcomed us for over 20 years. Our innovative product designs will always focus on functionality, comfort, and approachability, while also elevating performance. From sourcing the highest quality materials to building relationships with organizations that align with our goals, we take the time to ensure that everything we do helps people take less and do more. So for the first item, we're going to give away one of Glenn's books. So this is a subjective question, so there's no right or wrong answer. I'll pick someone to win. It could be funny or practical. So why do or don't you want to go ultralight? Let's just hear your thoughts. Again, no right or wrong answers. I'll just pick something that seems poignant. Why do you or why don't you want to go ultralight? And that could be on trail or off trail. Like I shared, sometimes I'm not ultralight because I just carry too much food and too much water because maybe I'm lazy and I didn't want to place water caches. But yeah, what do y'all think? Let's see some ideas in the chat. Oh, Roger already goes ultralight, but why, Roger? Oh, you already have a Mariposa 1. Well, you could regift it. This is a perfect gifting opportunity if you happen to win one of these. Oh, but this is for his book. So this is for the book that you were asking about buying. So. Anyone else out there? Okay, Jess says, because the extras I bring helps me enjoy the experience. Physical disabilities require ultralight. I want to keep going, 70 years old. That's great. Save my knees, keep me going longer. Ooh, Carly says, I don't go ultralight because I pack too much chocolate. That's kind of like my books and beer. Landon, I always overpack, tons of food. Well, mental comfort.
I think, part of going ultralight is so you have room for what's important to you, whether that's chocolate or beer or books or camera equipment or water. It's, to me, that's still ultralight. You're just making conscious choices as to what you carry.
Right. Yeah. Well, endurance. All right. I'm going to pick you, Christina, who said endurance. Yes. I think that's a great reason to go ultralight. So Christina, Jess is going to get your info and we will get a book out to you. So next, for another copy of the book, so there's a saying in the backpacking community, and some of your answers already hinted to this, that you carry your fears. So that means you overcompensate with things you're worried about by bringing too much. So in addition to food and water, I am scared of being bored, which is a little bit crazy when I'm out in this beautiful world. So I carry podcasts and music and reading material, books. And I've had that realization lately that, oh, I don't want to be bored. I want to have something to do. So this is the question to you. Again, no right or wrong answer. What fears do you carry when hiking? It might be you fear being cold, so you bring lots of extra clothing, or again, like you're thirsty, so you always have plenty of water. And that might be part of generosity, is you have extra to share with people. But yeah, what do y'all think? What are some ideas? Throw them in the chat. Oh, fear is that you'll miss something important back home. Oh, overpack clothes, Lynn. Yes, I understand that. Fear being alone, a heavier communication device. Yeah, I hear that. All of those I think are very logical. Oh, large game, like bears and moose. Yeah. Clothes, water, snacks. Yeah, I love that you have more to share. That's a great way to look at it. Well, I'm going to go with Carly, fear of being alone. So now you can bring Glen's book with you and have his voice in your ear, so you won't be so alone on the next backpacking trip. Okay, now let's give away a pack. This will be for the Mariposa 60. So this is some trivia, and there was a hint in Glen's presentation. So the first person to type in the correct answer into the chat wins. What was Gossamer Gear's first product, and what was it called? So again, there was a hint if you were paying attention. What was the first product? Oh, Jill got the G1. Yes, Jill and Robert are big fans. So yes, Jill, Duncan, you're right. It was the G1 and it was a backpack. Oh, I guess. Yeah.
I already have the Mariposa, so take the next person, please.
I would actually beg to differ here. I don't think I've seen the correct answer yet.
Okay, keep them coming then. Glen's the ultimate. He knows what.
The G4. So the first product was the G4. I sewed 3 packs before I put the plans on the internet, and we started selling them. So I think Bill actually won with G4.
Trick question. Tricked me.
There you go.
Great. Congrats, Bill. We'll get you a Mariposa. So this is for the one. The one is a 17.7 ounce tent, so perfect for your ultralight setup. So this is another trivia question. Common ultralight wisdom advises backpackers to keep the weight of the big 3 to under 2 pounds each. What are the big 3?
Pack, tent, bag. Pant, tent, and bag.
Not quite there. So I see tent, cooking pack. No, not quite. Pack, tent, sleeping bag. Glen, yes, pack, shelter, because it could be a tarp or a tent. Glen, should we take tent, pack, tent, sleeping bag? I think we'll give it to Lynn. Good job, Lynn. So congrats. We'll be sending you the one shelter. So yeah, if you can keep your pack, your shelter, and your sleeping bag, because when I hiked the AT in 2002, my pack itself weighed 7 pounds. It was ridiculous. Like, things have come so far. There weren't a lot of options back then, but if you can get your big 3 to weigh less than my AT pack weighs, you're in good shape. So final giveaway, one more book from Glen, and this is another question with no right or wrong answers. So why do you want to read Glen's new book? Take Less, Do More. What's something you're interested in reading about? And pop that into the chat and I'll pick someone to win. So why do you want to read Glen's new book? Maybe what do you hope to get out of it? Tulsi says he's got so much wisdom to share. Agreed. Mandy said, ooh, took my first backpacking trip. I'm a newbie, could use the knowledge. Nice. Robert, to travel more lightly through life. Interested in applying lightweight philosophy to my life. Moved by Glen's humility and purpose. Ooh, this is going to be hard to choose. Think I'm going to go with Mandy, being just going on your first backpacking trip. You were in for a world of fun and wonder, and hopefully not too much pain if you take on some of these principles. So Mandy will get a copy of the book out to you in the mail. So thank you, all of you, for participating in that. So I'm going to...
I would like to mention the book is available both, obviously, hard copy, also Kindle, and also audio. So people who won should somehow indicate what it is they want to get. Obviously, the audio would be probably the lightest, but happy to send whatever people want.
We will ask that when I will follow up with all of you winners and we'll ask what format. So thank you, Glen and Gossamer Gear, for your generosity today. And with that, we're going to transition into the conversation portion of the event.